All right, welcome everybody to webinar week bajillion 999,600 or whatever it is. Again, Gary is going to yell at me for getting that wrong, but whatever it is, it's a lot. But fortunately, it's not going to feel like Groundhog Day because we actually got something fun to talk about today. Gary is off visiting his family in Kentucky. Fun side fact. I think he resubscribed to the Tesla self-driving, so the car would drive itself to Kentucky. So I'm curious to know how that went for him. Evidently, Jennifer was pretty nervous about it. But anyway, Jack is joining me from the palatial offices of Tampa Bay Shoemaker offices. So hey, Jack.
Hey, yeah, you wouldn't know it. I actually asked for an interior office because I would never get any work done. Because on both sides, you have the cruise ships coming in from over here on this side, and then you have all the people on their private boats hanging out over here, up and down the river. So, yeah, so that's why it's more
Yeah,
beautiful what you
good
see.
choice. It is a beautiful town, especially if you're kind of down there where this stuff's happening. So
Yep.
that's pretty cool, man. Good for you guys. Anyway, today's topic is the big beautiful tax bill and what's in it. We're not I'm not educated enough yet to know about the cuts. I'm educated enough to know about the tax policy stuff. If you've gotten any of the cuts, Jack, we'd get to that, but I figured we'd focus on tax and then, focus on other stuff um, in another future webinar. And that's all on the assumption that this thing actually gets somewhere, out of the Beyond the House and Ways Committee, which is where it's currently at, and now it's in a compromise hell. So, Jack, you got any opening tirade before we dive into what's in this thing?
No, I mean it's all related to all of it, so we can just go ahead and jump in and see what's on people's minds and kind of dispel the rumors as much as we can and affirm what we think might happen. But even then, who knows really? So
Yeah, no, good, good call, good call. So yeah, so diving right in to this thing. So first off, um, funny enough, it actually is called the One Big Beautiful Bill. So, that's interesting. Usually they have more creative names, so I guess we're sticking with that creative name. In terms of passage, generally, it's got to make it out of the different committees, which it's made it out of the House Ways and Means Committee, which is the party that the committee that's responsible for budgeting stuff and enacting tax policy. And then it's got to move from there, to full passage in the House. And then from there, it's got to go over to the Senate. And if you look at, kind of big, so you're just going to assume that we're not going to get any Democrats that vote for this. So if you look at where are the real sticking points before we dive into it. This would have been a really fun time to have you guys on, Jack. But the real sticking points are um, on the conservative end of the spectrum, which is more the Freedom Caucus side of the equation. The cuts to Medicaid in particular are not deep enough, which is one of the offsetting provisions. Hey, we're gonna make some tax cuts permanent, and the way we're gonna pay for those is we're gonna cut some entitlements and some other programs. On the conservative end of the spectrum, they're not enough. Um, and to be clear, mo having not read the proposals, sort of the theory behind the entitlement cuts is that, hey, we're giving entitlements to some people that otherwise, really could go get their own insurance to cover stuff. I don't know how you can say that and also talk about feeding kids, which is the SNAP program, but that's neither here nor there. So that's the, that's kind of the rub on the one side. On the other side, which is the more middle of the road Republican side, particularly where they're in a Democratic state, they're more concerned that the state and local tax deduction, which was increased as part of this, which is, the deduction we used to get for paying our state income taxes, that's not enough. They'd like it to be more. That's just it. It's sort of like, Jack, this is sort of like Top Gun Maverick. That's miracle number one.
Yes, tell me
So
more.
yeah, so then you move on to miracle number two, which is, what does the Senate do to this thing? And I mean, again, no less than Ron Johnson, coming out and saying, I don't see how this is going to pass. Could be posturing. You got Steve Bannon who said, hey, a lot of MAGA voters actually also Medicaid recipients. That's going to be a real problem. Which is true because, a lot of um like if you just take my hometown, my not the town that I was born in, but the town that I was raised for part of my life in, Blackwell, Oklahoma, population 6,000, served by rural healthcare. Like when they talk about rural healthcare, and a good bit of that town are Medicaid recipients, and not that anybody's given me the voting record, but I suspect that 85%, voted for Trump, when all of a sudden they now have to pay for health insurance. Like I just that oh wait, what do you mean? That doesn't don't tell, like, honestly, the only employer in town are pot growers, Jack. So if you want to go work in a grow house, there's ample employment in Blackwell, Oklahoma. If you don't want to go work in a grow house, there's not ample employment in Blackwell, Oklahoma. So I just, I think that's the primary concern on the other side of the aisle. Sorry, not the other side of the aisle, the more center Republican party, especially if they're going to be in tight congressional races, because there's a lot of Senate seats that are up for approval. At the same time, I kind of empathize with them. It's, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you don't vote for it, you're now part of the party that couldn't get anything done. They let tax cuts expire. If you do vote for it in an entire race, you stuck it to people that are now angry with you. So, I wish them well, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this all works itself out. So I'll go ahead and dive into kind of the major provisions in this. And Jack, feel free to. I kind of figured that I would have to do the heavy lifting on this one anyway. So um, let me know. Chime in wherever you want to, or ask questions
I have
wherever you want
I have
to.
my list in case you miss one or two. So yes, all good. That's what I was
Okay.
looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So let's just talk about kind of the big things that we expected to be in there first. The big things that we expected to be in there is, a permanent extension of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Like, we figured that was going to be in there. That's making rates permanent, um, which would be, the pass-through income deduction for partnerships and LLCs, and also making the reduced rates that we had as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. So we expected that to be in there, and it is. We expected to see some movement on the estate tax. So they're making the estate tax exemption amount, they're raising a little bit, making it permanent, leaving an index for inflation, which is a good fix. So we generally expected that to happen. And that is, in fact, what happened. So those were the things that we really expected to happen. What we were hoping would happen is we were hoping that they would do something with depreciation expensing, and they did. They're bringing back bonus depreciation 100%, because that had phased out, and they're also raising the Section 179 limitation, which those are all things we're hoping for. Had our fingers crossed. So that's good stuff. And then the other thing that we're hoping for is we were hoping that they would fix the R&D credit problem that's been in place for a while, which basically states that if you have research and development, you've got to capitalize research and development on your balance sheet, even though it qualifies for credit. Well, that sucks because it means you're losing the payroll deduction in the current year in exchange for getting an expense over 5 years and also getting a tax credit. So in the long run, the way it works now does work out better, but in the short run, you're paying more taxes to pay less tax in the future. And last time I checked, nobody likes paying more now to save something in the future when it comes to income taxes. So that was a pleasant surprise in terms of stuff that they did that we kind of we're kind of hoping would get addressed, stuff that we figured would get addressed, and then the stuff that we kind of knew would probably get addressed. The unexpected things that have happened, and this is probably where Jack's going to chime in and say, "Wow, who would have thought they would have wanted to do that?" This is the everybody gets a pony stuff. So if you're a restaurant worker, congratulations, you get a pony. You know, no tax on tips is in there. Um, if you're an hourly worker and work overtime, you get a pony and a unicorn. No tax on overtime. Uh, if you are an old person, why this one's there, I have no idea. But you get a new car because you get an exemption. Let's keep in mind that for seniors people, remember Adam's a libertarian, right? For seniors people, if you make below a certain amount, your Social Security income is not taxed anyway. So let's say that you're living in, Jimmy Buffett's, whatever they're called. What are they called, Jack? Margaritaville. So you're living in Margaritaville, having a great time, living on Social Security plus your 401k plan. You never paid taxes on the damn 401k plan in the first place. So you got it. The whole deal there was I got a tax deduction. It was removed from my income, knowing that I would have to pay for it in the future. Like that's part of the deal. Guess what? Now you get an exemption from your income, in addition to the exemption they already got associated with Social Security. You're welcome, seniors. I'm probably going to go to hell for that. My parents are going to be mad at me for that, Jack, because they're all still alive and probably are saying, Yahoo!
That's
And then,
okay. We all know you're an equal opportunity offender. You're just picking on old people today, so it's all good.
yeah, no, that's right. At least it's not the lawyers. And then another fun one that was unexpected is you buy an American car, you get a deduction for the loan interest. So there you go. So that's I hope they make that retroactive for my F-150 Lightning. So that's kind of the big stuff. I mean, they made some other periphery changes too in terms of raising itemized deductions, in terms of like just kind of keeping up with the Joneses from an inflationary standpoint from that perspective. But that's the big items, in terms of wow, that's what I expected versus yeah, I thought that was interesting on the campaign trail, but I can't believe it made it in here.
So, and I was looking for a good, concise way of talking about what they are, but I guess maybe the other than the obvious positive effects, talk about kind of what the predicted negative effects or the naysayers would say on that. And I don't know if you want to take a shot at that. I can share the
Yeah,
list that,
fired up, yeah.
yeah, okay. So according to AI, but this is a more concise version of what I found in doing my own independent research while Adam was talking, is that the potential negative effects is that increased national debt, potentially in higher interest rates and inflation, disproportionate benefits for the wealthy, um, kind of the same things that we hear all the time when these things come about. Cuts to social programs, Medicaid, food stamps, impacting disproportionately income individuals and families, uncertainty and complexity. Okay, that's kind of a throw in. Potential for economic distortions, and they focus on elimination of taxes on tips, unintended consequences, and distortions in the economy. And then, I think we had talked about this previously a little bit, but not maybe pursued it. But would employers now push more? Say, okay, well, we're going to employ you, but this is really tip income, so don't have to pay taxes on that kind of thing. So maybe a derivative of that comment is that does it promote bad behavior with respect to compensation and what you categorize compensation as for your inline workers at a restaurant or wherever it may be. So those are the
Yeah.
top ones.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And it was also silent on the FICA tip credit. So that would be a fun little irony that because the way the FICA tip credit works is that as a restaurateur, to incentivize me to actually report tip income, I get a credit associated with the employer portion of the payroll taxes. So like they're not paying taxes, but I'm still getting a credit for taxes that I never actually paid anyway. I just asked them to report on the taxes that they're not paying. And I kind of echo your comments in terms of, overtime. Guess who's not getting time and a half anymore, Jack? Like that's
Right.
ridiculous. That's ridiculous, right? So because you're not paying taxes on it, it's like that's like getting two times, because you're not paying tax on it. So I hear you, Andrew Tucker. You had a question. Who qualifies as an old person based on this legislation, 65 or older? Which when I was 33 and started the firm seemed like a long ways away. Now that I'm 52 and suddenly I'm like getting eligible for being able to live in a retirement community, this is getting ridiculous.
There are two things, sorry, two things that I found that I wasn't, and I don't think you mentioned it, or maybe I missed it. And not that this would impact me at any time in my lifetime, probably anyway, that larger estate and gift tax exemption increased to 15 million adjusted for inflation starting in 2026. And then also, there was another one on here, R&D costs were listed, it being increased. Oh, that was the other thing. Opportunity zone program. So those of you that are into real estate or investing into real estate, so apparently that's going to be restoked a little bit. You may recall that it was kind of a limited opportunity, buy now kind of thing, and it was a decreasing benefit over the course of time, meaning at the point of investment. So you had an end point, and then if you invested on the front end, you get a larger benefit on the back end versus and waiting and seeing how things go. The benefit was reduced, and so I don't know the details of exactly what that is or how they're kind of restoking it, but there was mention of it in an article about that.
Yeah, no, you're correct. So I did touch on the estate tax and the R&D credit, but yeah, you are correct in terms of the opportunity zone credit. Basically what they're saying is, hey, let's not let's not do let's go ahead and kind of cancel program one, which is what we're currently operating under. Not cancel meaning like, hey, sorry you were in it. Now it's good. They're just killing it early and replacing it with program number two. With the way that I read into the opportunity zone thing is that I'm actually in favor of what they're doing here because like when you look at like some of the places that qualified for opportunity zones in the first place, because the governors are the ones that actually define, what determines a qualified opportunity zone. It's like, you know, Myrtle Beach beach property. Now, I see that we have some of our Myrtle Beach people sitting in on this call, and no offense to them, in terms of like, yeah, I get it. That there's probably some beach property that needs to be revitalized, but come on, an opportunity zone, like it's beachfront property, So the what they did is they basically focused more in terms of rural areas, and then made it a little bit more difficult to qualify, meaning like the median income level of the people that live in the area is lower, has to be lower than it is today. So I was generally in favor of that, and that they were trying to make it a little bit harder to qualify, to get a little bit more targeting in terms of where they're going.
And I don't know if that also impacts kind of industrial sites. I think when I think of opportunity zones, I think more of kind of uh, what is the area over where the music factory,
Yeah.
right? And that was to me an opportunity zone before opportunity zones were officially called opportunity zones. There were lots of incentives. It was a place that was I shouldn't say toxic, but I mean if you go, there's still remnants of what that area was and still is. I mean, I think the railroad still runs through there. I've seen trains go and heard them when I've been over there, not often in my later years, but in my earlier years, when I was over there every once in a while for concerts and things like that. But so yeah, and I think that so and we've seen in Charlotte, if you drive down South Boulevard and you see all these, it's just it is painful for me personally to drive down South Boulevard at any time now because there are crosswalks every fifth of a mile because there's so many people walking around kind of thing. So I try to avoid the area when I'm in a hurry, but I'm very grateful and appreciative and happy that, south part of the city is growing in that fashion and bringing people to Charlotte and helping with the economy. But, they're part of that is through things like this, through opportunity zone and other incentives. So anyway, went way off on a tangent on that, but so
Yeah.
be it.
So then the other thing that they did too, in terms of just yeah, I know it's audio, that's why I brought it up. Because I'm aware of that, and I remember scratching my head saying, "Hey, it's legal, but geez." um, I think the other thing, I don't know if anybody on the call, really cared about it. But the other big area that they have in the bill, which it's just funny how it's called this: Make America Win Again, which is under subtitle C, Part One: Working Families Over Elites. Um, so I could get into like just the humor in terms of what's in this relative to like all the other provisions that are in here that benefit super rich people, but basically that's the section where they get rid of all the green stuff. That all goes away there, um, as does uh, any sort of thing if you were a private foundation or a college or university that has a large endowment. That's where your stuff goes away, and it so it's interesting that's what they called it. So basically, um, you're elite if you're into green, or if you go to a university that has an endowment, they want to tax the endowment more. Now I could, like I could make the argument all day long that actually if you guys enjoy it, Malcolm Gladwell's podcast Revisionist History has a fabulous takedown on elite school endowments. that is just awesome. So I'm generally not for them. At the same time, it's just funny that that's where it appears here.
And I want to share something that's not in the tax bill, but it's related. And I think that because it was already in process, and so I think it kind of predates the kind of hubbub with the tax bill, which is dealing with independent contractors and classification of them being employees. And you may remember from more than a few programs ago, and apparently I'm not supposed to say program. I'm supposed to say show because program is so old school. And my kids said, I said something, are you going to watch that program, meaning TV show? So I apologize to the younger people on here for using the word program. But so previously on our show, we had talked about this U.S. Department of Labor uh, law, and it's a Biden era rule, basically. And so it's really a regulation, not a law statute. And it is the USDOL, and this was announced maybe 2 weeks ago. And that's why I say it kind of predates all this hubbub a little bit, but it was in the works. And what the Department of Labor had done was they basically said that, yeah, they made it harder for an employer to treat a person as an independent contractor versus employee. And so you have various guidelines, whether it's state, whether it's federal, as to whether or not a person can be an independent contractor or an employee. And so the general concept was that the rule that has been in place, um, it expanded instances where a worker could be deemed an employee. Workers who are considered employees, I mean, you have things that like minimum wage, workers' comp, and those kind of things. So it really is creating a higher burden on individuals, on employers who really are utilizing legit independent contractors, but change the rules a little bit. And they haven't repealed it, but the Department of Labor has said they're not going to enforce it. So they're not going to be out there looking, they're not going to be doing audits based upon this new or the 2024 rule. Some people called it the gig worker rule. And you had a lot of groups like Uber and Lyft and other workforce type coalitions and groups that were really knocking on doors on Capitol Hill and saying, this really what might seem not as impactful, and you're trying to basically protect a worker who should have these benefits. I mean, if you are truly an employee and you get injured on the job, you should have workers' comp insurance and not be an independent deemed as an independent contractor and left on your own kind of thing. So those changes sounds like that they were effective in their efforts to be able to get them to the Department of Labor change their mind. So relatedly, because then also with employees talking about taxes, obviously you have the issue of the withholding of half of the money that goes to the government, with the taxpayer paying the other half, and you don't have those things going on. The person still owes the full amount of tax, but it's in the form of self-employment tax rather than payroll tax
Mhm.
that is removed, and then also you're paying your one half as a W-2 employee. So that's good news all around for employers, maybe not so much for individuals who were hoping that they would get those benefits because they felt like that they were doing employee type work rather than independent contractor work.
Yeah. Other fun side fact in here, raises the national debt by 4 trillion. So that presumably would be, to pay for it. And then some via the tax cuts. So what's unfair about what is unfair about the statement of like, this is a big tax cut, that's unfunded, so we need to raise the debt to pay for it, and hopefully it gets offset somewhere else. I mean, the reality is it's just it's we're paying for these tax cuts now. It's just they were via debt. It's just that they were set to expire Thus, we would have raised more money coming in based on their expiration. So this is just removing the expiration of the cuts. Thus, the continued adding to the debt would just continue like it is today versus being less so. So, while they kind of sort out all the scoring and stuff like that, they slipped in a little, hey, by the way, let's raise the debt by 4 trillion in here too.
Well, we have more than a few people on today, but I don't see a whole lot of questions. I'm looking through. Um, okay, so Joseph, Joe, the other Joe, says that he created the first national address searchable database for opportunity enterprise zones for ADP taxes services years ago. So yeah, I mean, this is not something that's necessarily new, but it's being restoked, which is great. Okay. And then just a little further discussion that in some states, all locations are an opportunity zone, no distinction, just tax credits to build commercial property. So, um, okay. So as you said, and I didn't know that, Adam, that it was a state by state thing as far as the standards that are set by the governors. So the executive branch of the states that are setting that versus any governmental agency or even Congress or a committee of Congress that's doing that, which is interesting. So does that mean opportunity zone funds come from the states and there's no federal subsidy? Because and that's maybe an unfair question because I'm not an opportunity zone expert at all, but that raises a curious question if anybody knows the answer to that.
So I believe each governor submits, again, the way I understand it is each state kind of determines based on some criteria laid out by the government what qualifies and what doesn't qualify. Yeah, Joseph commented some states done by the Economic Development Organization within the state. There's qualification criteria like median income has to be, blah blah blah, within the area and some other stuff, which is what they're currently messing with. But then it's up to us to draw our lines, in terms of what qualifies versus doesn't qualify.
Interesting. Okay. I have another unrelated issue to share, which is some of you may have heard about this thing called the SBA registry. And for those of you in the franchise world would understand this or thinking about going into the franchise world, is that the SBA, when they make a loan to a franchisee, that if you have certain words and provisions and do not have certain words and provisions in a document, then the SBA will loan to that franchisee to develop, build, and operate the franchise unit. What franchisors can do is they can submit their franchise agreement and either put the language in the agreement or which more franchisors do, which is that they have an addendum, the SBA addendum to the franchise agreement that says to the extent that, which as my kids remind me says if, really it really means if those provisions are in the franchise agreement, then they are overridden by they are invalid or these certain provisions are put into them as a substitute. And what that allows the SBA to do is to and the underlying lender, because recall that the SBA in most cases, not in all cases, as we've seen through COVID, is not the lender, it is a guarantor, that they will put their blessing upon a franchise agreement that has the addendum that is on a list that is maintained by the SBA that says that this franchise system has certified that they, in every franchise agreement that involves an SBA loan, these provisions prevail. And so that way you don't have a 2 week, 3 week or so review process by the SBA person who's involved in the loan. They can basically say, check that box. It's an approved franchisor. And then it's really up to the parties, meaning the franchisor and the franchisee, to include that language in the documentation, which I will tell you doesn't always happen. And we have to go back and maybe amend franchise agreements, or they are presented but not signed at the end of the day, which is, it's an addendum, needs to be signed separately. So anyway, a little bit deeper into that, that I wanted to share in case you are involved. And I see maybe not necessarily my clients directly involved. I mean, I obviously have franchise clients, but a lot of times I see my business clients who are investing into, it's kind of maybe a side hustle, or maybe it is that they are, in one case, let's say hypothetically, providing a job for a child, an adult child, to work and become the CEO of this unit, operating a certain franchise. And so, in any case, the goal is to make it easier for SBA borrowers in a franchise scenario. So again, Cliff Clavin-ish type information, but I've encountered that scenario more often than casually, occasionally. So thought I'd share that. Have any other random thoughts about anything?
No, I'm good. Did we what
I
did
think we've covered it.
any other questions from the audience?
I mean, it's not, very glamorous stuff, or very, I mean, we could go into the weeds, but then we'd bore everybody and people would sign off. So we're not going to do that. I will be seeing my guys, Ryan and Chris, for a debrief as to how their experience was, a couple weeks ago in and as I expected, and as we joke around that it was going to be a battle, but it obviously wasn't ever going to be that way, because they do work together. They're very sincere when they said that, and I've seen them work together and take different perspectives. It is, maybe one person's working harder than the other, but then it flip flops, right? Depending on who is actually sitting in the White House and who's running the Capitol building.
Yep. Yep, that's correct. Do we have any
All right.
do we have any questions from the audience before we close this out early? Every time Gary's not on, we shut it down early. I don't know what to think about that.
Gary's a good moderator filler. We kind of get to the point, I think. And
Yeah,
so, but that's fine. I mean, I'd rather give you guys back some of your time
yeah,
rather than try to, fill the time, I hope you feel like you got your money's worth today in the abbreviated session. So,
that's right. Very cool. Well, thank you very much, guys. We appreciate it.
all right. Thank you. Have a good rest of the week.
All right, thank you. Bye.